Look at the natural world today, and you will find rules. Predators are built for stealth, speed, or calculated ambush. Prey animals are built for evasion, endurance, or defense. Every creature occupies a logical space in the complex web of life. Evolution is a slow, methodical process that punishes inefficiency and rewards balance. But deep within the fossil record, buried under 29 million years of rock and dust, lies evidence of a time when the rules of biology simply collapsed. Nature did not always favor the balanced. Sometimes, the Earth birthed anomalies, glitches in the evolutionary matrix that defied logical anatomy. Today, we uncover a creature so grotesquely designed, so fundamentally wrong in its proportions, that its very existence feels like a violation of the natural order. For decades, paleontology referred to it with a misleading name. They called it the hell pig. But the truth is far more terrifying. Nothing about the Daeodon is normal. It was not a pig. It belonged to an extinct lineage known as the Entelodonts, genetic cousins to the ancestors of modern whales and hippopotamuses. Yet, it looked like neither. It looked like a biological weapon forged in a nightmare. The Daeodon shoshonensis, a name that translates to hostile tooth or terrible tooth, was the apex of a lineage built entirely upon the foundation of pure, unadulterated violence. It haunted the vast, arid plains of North America during the late Oligocene and early Miocene epochs. To understand the sheer magnitude of this biological glitch, you must first comprehend its scale. Imagine a creature standing nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder, boasting a total length of over 12 feet, a towering mass of dense muscle and reinforced bone weighing over 2,000 pounds, a full ton of terrestrial brutality. But the true horror of the Daeodon was not just its immense size. It was the deeply unsettling geometry of its head. The skull alone measured 3 feet in length. It was essentially the size of a fully grown human torso, and protruding from the sides of its lower jaw and cheeks were massive, jagged flanges of bone. These jugal flanges are an absolute paradox. Why would any mammal evolve such immense, fleshy, bone-reinforced outgrowths on its face? The fossil record provides a grim answer. The skulls of entelodonts are routinely found covered in deep, traumatic puncture wounds and healed bone fractures. These bizarre facial shields were evolved to protect the most vital areas of their head during unimaginably violent territorial clashes with their own kind. They ripped into each other's faces with the force of industrial machinery. These bone anchors also served a second, more lethal purpose. They acted as attachment points for jaw muscles so absurdly massive that they generated a bite force comparable to a hydraulic press. Its mouth was a house of horrors. At the front, canines the thickness of a human wrist, designed to impale and hold. At the back, massive, flattened molars engineered specifically to shatter solid bone. And here, we arrive at the ultimate evolutionary glitch, the cursorial guillotine. A beast with a head this massive, carrying a ton of bulk, should theoretically be slow. It should be a lumbering scavenger, dragging its heavy frame across the plains. But the Earth is cruel. Over millions of years of evolution, the Daeodon lost its outer toes. It developed elongated, highly specialized legs, ending in cloven hooves, remarkably similar to those of a primitive horse or a bison. It was a 1-ton tank built for high-speed pursuit. A creature of this mass moving at velocity in an open field would have been a virtually unstoppable force of nature. Which leads us to the dark thesis of this investigation. Nature did not design the Daeodon to be a graceful hunter. The natural world did not create a noble predator that stalked its prey with skill and precision. No, evolution created a biological executioner. We must strip away the romanticized view of prehistoric life. The Daeodon operated on a principle of psychological terror and absolute inevitability. It did not need to be stealthy. It did not need to hide. Imagine the most lethal, highly coordinated pack hunters of the era, the formidable bear dogs, having just expended all their energy bringing down a large prey animal. They are exhausted, panting in the cold air, preparing to feed. And then, from the shadows of the morning mist, a towering, nightmarish silhouette emerges. It charges not with the intent to fight, but with the intent to subjugate. It used sheer intimidation and overwhelming physical mass to steal the hard-earned resources of other apex predators. And when it claimed a carcass, it did not merely feed. It obliterated. It consumed the flesh, the organs, the marrow, and it ground the very bones of its victims into dust, erasing all evidence that the prey animal had ever existed. It is living, terrifying proof that there were dark chapters in the history of our planet where survival of the fittest did not reward intelligence or grace. It rewarded pure, unadulterated, and extreme violence. We are about to dissect the biology of a monster. To truly grasp the nightmare of the Daeodon, we must examine the environment that forged it. The North America of 20 million years ago was not a forgiving place. The lush forests of earlier epochs were dying out, replaced by harsh, unforgiving, open grasslands. Survival in this new, brutal arena demanded extreme adaptations. Herbivores were becoming faster, evolving longer legs to sprint across the exposed plains. In response, predators had to become sleeker, developing cooperative hunting strategies to run down their meals. But the Daeodon rejected the path of the cooperative hunter. It chose the path of the tyrant. It became the ultimate opportunist, a creature that recognized that the most efficient way to survive was not always to hunt, but to conquer what others had already killed. Yet, a biological mystery remains. How does a solitary animal, even one weighing 2,000 pounds, consistently bully entire packs of specialized apex predators away from their hard-earned kills? The answer lies in its biomechanical design and its psychological warfare. When a Daeodon approached a kill site, it did not slink in from the shadows. It announced its presence. While we cannot hear the sounds it made, paleontologists theorize that its massive nasal cavity and deep chest could produce resonating, low-frequency vocalizations capable of vibrating the ground, a physiological alarm bell signaling the arrival of a walking disaster. This intimidation factor was backed by physical weaponry that defied mammalian logic. Let us look closer at those jaws. The front teeth were not just large, they were heavily worn down in many fossil specimens. This extreme wear tells a violent story. It suggests that the Daeodon was not just eating soft flesh. It was violently pulling, tearing, and ripping through the toughest hides, sinews, and tendons. It was dismembering carcasses with a sheer lack of finesse. But it is the back of the mouth that holds the darkest secret. The premolars and molars are enormous, blunt, and incredibly robust. They show specific patterns of wear that are seen today in only one type of animal: the bone-crushing scavengers, like the spotted hyena. However, the skull of a Daeodon was infinitely more powerful than any modern hyena. It could wrap its jaws around the femur of a rhinoceros-sized creature and snap it in a single, devastating motion. This meant that a kill site abandoned by a Daeodon was truly barren. It consumed the entire animal. If you are fascinated by the sheer brutality of these prehistoric titans and the relentless logic of evolution, let us know. Comment the word glitch below this video to join the ranks of those investigating the darker side of natural history. Your engagement helps us uncover more of these biological anomalies. Returning to the anatomy of the beast, the neck of the Daeodon presents yet another terrifying paradox. The muscles required to hold up a 3-foot-long skull and generate such immense bite force had to be anchored somewhere. The thoracic vertebrae of the Daeodon feature massively elongated neural spines, creating a huge hump over its shoulders, similar to a modern bison. This hump was entirely composed of dense muscle fibers pulling against the skull. When the Daeodon bit down and pulled backward, it was utilizing the entire weight of its 2,000-pound body, channeled through a neck built like a suspension bridge. This gave it the ability to literally tear the limbs off a carcass. But what happens when the scavengers are gone? What happens when there are no other predators to steal from? Did the Daeodon actively hunt? The cursorial adaptations, the long, specialized running legs, point to an uncomfortable truth. Yes, it hunted, and its method of hunting was likely as gruesome as its scavenging. It did not stalk. It relied on explosive bursts of speed in open terrain. It would lock its sights on a target, perhaps an injured camel or an early, primitive horse, and charge like a freight train. Its method of execution would not be a calculated bite to the jugular. It would be a catastrophic collision. The Daeodon would use its massive head as a battering ram, smashing into the side of its prey to break ribs and cause massive internal trauma. Once the prey was down, the execution was swift and messy. A single bite to the spine or the cranium, crushing the nervous system instantly. It was a chaotic, brutal end for anything caught in its path. This duality, the ability to outrun fast prey and the capacity to crush bone like a scavenger, made it an absolute terror. But as we dig deeper into the layers of the Miocene Earth, an even more unsettling question arises. If the Daeodon was the ultimate terrestrial weapon, an unstoppable force of aggression and power, what could possibly lead to the extinction of such a perfectly engineered monster? What kills the apex of violence? The answer lies not in another predator, but in the slow, unseen forces of the Earth itself, a mechanism of death far more insidious than any jaw or claw. As we continue our descent into the biological nightmare of the Daeodon, we must confront the reality of its daily existence. This was an animal that lived in a perpetual state of conflict. The fossilized skulls of these titans are essentially historical maps of extreme violence. Paleontologists frequently uncover Daeodon remains with gashes up to an inch deep, carved into their bone armor, healed fractures along their snouts, and puncture wounds that could only have been inflicted by the teeth of another Daeodon. These were not mere territorial scuffles. These were gladiatorial death matches. When two adult Daeodons clashed over a carcass or a mate, the impact would have been earth-shattering. They would stand parallel to one another, swinging their massive heads sideways like living warhammers. The bone flanges on their cheeks, those evolutionary anomalies, absorbed the brunt of the impacts, preventing their skulls from shattering completely under the force of a rival's jaws. They engaged in jaw-locking, attempting to crush each other's snouts, a brutal test of endurance and pure hydraulic power. The winner took everything. The loser, if it survived, walked away with disfiguring injuries that would slowly heal into grotesque masses of bone. This level of intraspecies aggression is rare. It suggests a population constantly living on the absolute edge of survival, where resources were so fiercely contested that only the most violent individuals could secure a future. And this violence was not just directed outwards. The metabolism of a warm-blooded mammal weighing 1 ton, built for high-speed sprinting and constant combat, would have been astronomical. The Daeodon was a biological engine running at maximum capacity, and it required an endless supply of fuel. It could never stop eating. Its entire existence was a desperate, bloody crusade against starvation. To fuel its massive body, the Daeodon had to be a generalist of the most extreme order. While its skull was engineered for shattering bone and tearing flesh, its digestive system was likely capable of processing anything. During times of severe drought, when prey was scarce and carcasses were stripped bare by the sun, the Daeodon would turn to the earth itself. Its massive tusks, highly worn in many specimens, were likely used to dig up giant, fibrous tubers and roots. It would use its sheer weight to rip vegetation from the dry ground, consuming whatever organic matter it could find. It was a creature of total consumption, but even this adaptability could not save it from the turning wheel of deep time. As we approach the climax of this investigation, we must look beyond the individual monster and observe the shifting continents. The world of the Daeodon was changing. The climate of the early Miocene was cooling, becoming increasingly arid. The forests continued to recede, and the vast, open grasslands expanded globally. This change forced an evolutionary arms race among the herbivores. The primitive horses and camels that the Daeodon hunted were becoming faster, lighter, and more agile. They were evolving beyond the reach of the cursorial guillotine. The Daeodon, trapped in its massive, heavily armored body, could not adapt fast enough to keep up with the increasing speed of its prey. If you are captivated by the dark realities of evolution and the monsters that time left behind, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are uncovering the most terrifying biological anomalies in natural history, and you do not want to miss what we dig up next. As the herbivores grew faster, the Daeodon found itself relying more and more on scavenging and stealing kills. But another threat was emerging from the shadows. New predators were crossing the land bridges into North America. Advanced forms of bear dogs, sleeker, faster, and hunting in highly coordinated packs, were beginning to dominate the plains. They were more efficient, required less food, and could outmaneuver the lumbering giant. The Daeodon, the undisputed tyrant of the plains, suddenly found itself outpaced and outmatched. The very adaptations that made it a terror, its immense size, its heavy bone armor, and its massive caloric requirements, were becoming its greatest liabilities. The biological tank was running out of fuel. How exactly did the reign of this apex monster come to an end? The final days of the Daeodon hold a grim lesson about the ruthlessness of the natural world. The end of the Daeodon did not come in a glorious, final battle against a rival Leviathan. The natural world does not offer such cinematic closures. Instead, the apocalypse of the Hell Pig was agonizingly slow, silent, and deeply pathetic. It was a death by 1,000 ecological cuts, a slow suffocation brought on by the very environment that had birthed it. Around 19 million years ago, the global climate of our planet underwent a drastic and merciless shift. The Earth cooled, trapping vast amounts of the ocean water within expanding polar ice caps. The humid, mixed woodlands and sprawling savannas of the Oligocene epoch began to wither and die. In their place, the endless, dry, and unforgiving steppes of the Miocene emerged. The continent of North America was being terraformed by a changing atmosphere, and the rules of survival were being rewritten overnight. For a creature that relied on sheer intimidation, explosive charges, and overwhelming physical mass, an open, coverless plain is an absolute death sentence. To ambush, or even sprint down a target, a predator of that size needs some element of geographical advantage, a tree line or tall vegetation to hide its massive silhouette. But the expanding grasslands removed all the shadows. The prey animals, the early horses and camels, could now see the towering, nightmarish bulk of the Daeodon from miles away. And more importantly, the prey was adapting to the open plains. They were evolving lighter bone structures, longer legs, and greater cardiovascular endurance. They were becoming much, much faster. The cursorial guillotine was no longer fast enough. The immense weight of its biological armor, the heavy bone flanges on its cheeks, the massive neck muscles built for tearing carcasses apart, the very traits that made it an invincible warlord in close combat, now anchored it to the earth, while its prey sprinted toward the horizon. And then came the final nail in the evolutionary coffin: the arrival of an entirely new tier of competition. From across the northern land bridges, highly advanced canids and ursids began to infiltrate the North American continent. These were not the solitary, hulking, brute force brawlers of the past. These new predators were agile, highly intelligent, and most terrifyingly for the Daeodon, they hunted in highly organized, strategic packs. A pack of advanced amphictyonids, the bear dogs, could run down a primitive horse with relentless, terrifying endurance. They would coordinate their attacks, exhaust the prey, and consume the kill rapidly. By the time the slow, lumbering solitary Daeodon marched to the site of the kill, Drawn by the scent of blood, the bear dogs were already gone. The bones were picked clean. The Daeodon found itself arriving at empty, silent battlefields. The resources it needed to fuel its massive frame were gone. The era of the tyrant was officially over. Imagine the sheer horror of the final days of the last Daeodon. A solitary, starving titan, its ribs protruding through thick, heavily scarred skin, wandering a vast alien plain that it no longer recognized or controlled. Its massive jaws, capable of crushing the femur of a rhinoceros into powder, were completely useless against the simple, undeniable reality of hunger. A 2,000-pound biological engine requires an astronomical amount of calories just to maintain its resting metabolic rate. Without an endless supply of flesh and marrow, the engine begins to violently consume itself. The massive muscles of its neck and shoulders would atrophy and shrink. The 3-foot-long skull, once a weapon of mass destruction, would become a crushing, unbearable weight, pulling its head toward the dirt. The beast would literally be dragged down by the very weapons evolution had given it. The Daeodon starved to death. It was not defeated by a stronger, larger monster. It was defeated by the relentless, unfeeling progression of time and climate. The Earth simply stopped providing for it. The extinction of the Daeodon perfectly validates our dark thesis. Evolution is not a ladder climbing toward a perfect, ultimate predator. It is a blind, chaotic, and utterly indifferent process. For a few million years, the environment of North America demanded extreme, unadulterated violence. The Daeodon answered that call and became the absolute master of its domain. But when the environment changed, that extreme specialization became a fatal, inescapable trap. The Earth punished the brawler and rewarded the adaptable. When we look at the shattered, bone-crushing skull of the Daeodon in a museum today, we are not just looking at a dead animal. We are looking at a grim monument to the impermanence of power. It serves as a chilling, quiet reminder that no matter how dominant, how heavily armored, or how violently powerful a species becomes, it is entirely at the mercy of the planet it walks upon. We sit at the top of the food chain today, confident in our technology, our concrete cities, and our intellect. We feel safe, but the fossil record is an open, endless graveyard of apex predators who also ruled their world without challenge. The Earth has broken titans of solid bone and muscle. It has erased lineages that survived for millions of years. The Daeodon is a ghost from an era of biological terror, a glitch in the matrix of life, whispering a cold truth from the ancient dust. In the end, the Earth reclaims absolutely everything, and the universe remains entirely indifferent to our existence. If you want to delve deeper into the forgotten monsters of our planet's history and uncover the secrets of the beasts that time left behind, check the link in the description to secure your copy of our exclusive ebook about extinct megafauna. It contains detailed dossiers, scientific breakdowns, and untold stories of the prehistoric titans that once ruled the Earth. To support our deep dives into the dark side of nature and help us produce more investigative documentaries, consider joining our Patreon or buying us a coffee through the links below. Your support is the only thing that keeps this documentary archive alive and allows us to keep digging up the past. Until next time, remember that the ground beneath your feet hides the bones of monsters.